Good morning, everyone. We'll call the special call meeting of the Jackson City Council to May 18, 2017 to order. And if you would please rise for the invocation and pledge. Father, we come before you this morning just thanking you for loving us, thanking you for giving us this day. Father, we thank you for a city, Father, in many, many ways that you've blessed us over the years. We thank you for this council whom you have placed in a position of authority with people in the city, Father, working for them. We would pray for wisdom for them, for discernment and guidance as they make decisions that affect your people's lives in this city. So, Father, we just pray that everything we say, everything we do will bring honor and glory to you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Need on a roll call, I think all council members are present with the exception of Councilman Cisco. He called in, he was a little under the weather this morning and he didn't sound good, so if you'd show him not present. Item 4 is the invitation for public comment, and I'll invite you all, if you have anyone that would want to speak on any item under new business. We only have one item under new business. If you'll let me know at that particular time, I'll be happy to call on you and ask you to come up and address the council, give your name and your address, if you would, when you come up. One item under new business, consideration of the City of Jackson's Budget Review Committee's recommendation for the city's fiscal year 2018 budget. The Budget Committee has been busy. We have 3 council members that have been members of that committee. Councilman Conger, Councilman Ernest Brooks, and Councilman Randy Wallace. We've had 2 citizens at large. I don't know if they're here. Dennis Henderson is here. Jimmy Exum has served on that committee very diligently over the past months. We appreciate them. So with that being said, I'll call on Councilman Randy Wallace as chair of that budget committee for his recommendations.
Thank you, Mayor. Like the Mayor said, we have been meeting diligently, looking at the budget for the city. We came up with several ideas, and one of the ideas we're presenting today. And to start off with, I'd like to call on Lewis Cobb, the city attorney, to kind of give you a history of where we stand on the sales tax that the city has been donating to schools.
Good morning.
Morning. Morning.
Probably should have called on Teresa Luna. She's
Okay.
she knows a lot more about this than I do, but we've worked together for the last few months on analyzing, in response to your questions, is the local option sales tax our half of the 1989 edition? Is that something we control, or is that something that control's been ceded to someone else? But let me put it in history. Up until the early 90s, the city of Jackson and Madison County each had separate school systems. The funding for that was complicated. There had been some litigation over the use of revenue sharing funds. There had been some back and forth. Every time the county raised property tax for schools, part of that came to the city based upon the average daily attendance. There were other grants. Both school systems had been sued in federal court over the segregation, and that lawsuit had been going on for more than 20 years each. And in '89, there was a movement to try to resolve funding problems, federal court litigation problems, and a lot of other problems by consolidation. Everything a city, and to a certain extent the county, does has to follow state law. We are all creations of a higher power. The higher power is the legislature. So when we started looking at the consolidation plan, what we did, what the planners did, and Ms. Luna was part of that planning process in '89, there was about a 40 or 50 page document outlining the plan for consolidating and unifying Jackson Madison County schools. That plan laid out a framework for merging the two schools, and that had a myriad of problems. Which schools, the students, the zones, the funding, there was difference in teacher salaries, there was capital needs, and that's all laid out in there. That consolidation plan pursuant to state statute was put on the ballot in 1989. At the same time, Madison County proposed raising the local option sales tax. The local option sales tax is a tool the state legislature had given to cities and counties across the state. It required a passage of a resolution, and the resolution had to be approved by the voters. Madison County had put a resolution on the ballot four previous times to raise the local option sales tax to the maximum, and it had not passed. It had been adopted in the late 60s as a local funding mechanism. Local option sales tax are divided by state law this way. Half goes to schools and half goes to the government that collects it. Now, there's a few minor deductions. It goes to the state accounts for it and sends it back. In the discussion of funding the additional needs for consolidation, the equaling up capital cost, it was proposed that the city's half of the increased local option would be used for education. And that was put on, the increase in the local option tax was put on the ballot as well. Now, the fact that they were both on the ballot at the same time meant they were being discussed at the same time. But there were several different things that could have happened. Sales tax could have passed, consolidated schools not. The sales tax would have been at the higher rate. Schools could have been consolidated without an increase in sales tax, and the county government would have had the obligation to fund the new school systems through other sources. The primary source at that time for local funding for the county was its property tax base. The property tax base in the '89 era was about $1.20 for the special education fund. They both passed. It took longer for the schools to start the consolidation process than it did for the tax collectors to get to work. And so before the consolidation was complete, this council, and it was a fairly new council back then because we'd had a change of government, voted to take the money that had been collected from its share of the increased local option sales tax and be given to schools. Since that time, the city has not tried to claim any portion of that local option in its budget. It's always been sent to the county, except for a couple of times when the county trustee was receiving the sales tax check and was deducting a fee of about 1% for taking a check, cashing it, and writing a check. I called it the most expensive check cashing service in America. But and the city council passed a resolution saying, we're altering, you can't do that. And that change was made by the city council alone. It didn't have to go get a private act. It didn't have to get joint approval. It was within the city's power. When the mayor and some of the councilmen asked me to look into this situation, what are the council's legal options? What I did is I got Ms. Luna, we started researching it. I came to the opinion that if there was not a contract, which is allowed under state law for the use of that money, it's the council's power. But because I knew this might attract some attention and there might be some dispute about it, I wanted to, as I said, consult somebody who had done more in the education funding than Ms. Luna and I had. And I contacted Bill Purcell. He actually started his legal career here, moved to Nashville, was in the legislature, helped write, and I think was the sponsor of the Better Education Plan, where state funding was changed. And after that, he served as mayor of Nashville, and after that, he went into private practice of law. And I told him the questions that we have, and I wanted him to give me his independent opinion. You look at it, you tell me, you see. And so he started asking for documents. And we got all the, the applicable laws, all the local resolutions, this plan, dug into the newspaper articles. He has a stack of relevant documents, and his conclusion was the same as mine, that there is no contract requiring us to give this money to anyone. It is the council's decision. Now, councils are, must meet as a group, agree as a group, and pass as a group. This council cannot bind another council except by contract or by franchise. There is a legal formality to this process. There were discussions, there were expectations, and I understand that my friends from the county have come to rely upon these, what I call donations from the city, and have an expectation that they're entitled to them every year until the end of time. The state statute says these proceeds can be given to another government by contract. And so the question is there a contract? And my opinion is, there's not a contract, not a binding legal contract. There is a method of doing business, but it is this council's within its power to use that money as it sees fit. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Any questions from council or any comments from
Yes, sir.
members of the Budget Committee?
I do have one. The referendum that was voted on for the consolidation as well as the sales tax, was it one tied to the other?
No, legally,
Was it perceived as one tied to the other?
you would need to ask the perceiver. But yes, I think certain people perceive that one was the other. And to that end, that's why we went back and read the newspaper articles, why we went back and looked through the consolidation plan. It's a 3-year plan. It has a $9 million estimate of transitioning funding equaling teacher salaries, other administration salaries, capital improvements, and $9 million was the approximate amount of the city's local option sales tax they were going to donate to the consolidation plan. But yes, I think people perceived it at that time, and some still do.
Was there a specified time period that those funds would be allocated?
The only time ever specified was 3 years. Now, that's why contracts are different from plans, projections. Contracts have a defined term, a defined subject matter, and things like that. And there are contracts between our city and our county for sharing of cost. We have had several joint funding agreements, and the joint funding agreements are specific down to the penny as to who pays how much of each one. And so the people who did the consolidation plan have done other contracts, and the other contracts are drawn up like contracts. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, now, I'm just needing a little clarification to make sure I understand. And you cleared up a lot of it with that comment. When the schools were consolidated, of course, that put an additional burden on the county. Now, I'm assuming that city council, and I don't even know who they were then, but I'm assuming they realized that if the county's going to take a large responsibility with these schools, we need to help them out. And the period that was decided upon was 3 years. Is that correct, to help them adjust? Am I correct in that? Am I close to that?
I have a copy of the consolidation plan here. The consolidation plan was a 3-year plan.
Okay,
Now,
okay,
that was the only time estimate.
okay, all right, okay, I get that,
Um,
okay. But we have continued it for 25 additional years, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And we've done that without coming back to the city councils each year to get their approval, is that correct?
It's
And I
like
may
the
have asked
second law of
something that you're not sure.
thermodynamics. A body in motion tends to stay in motion until force is applied.
Until
And
someone
so
objects? Okay.
that decision has continued on each year because there has been no change.
So the resolution has continued on because it has not been brought to the forefront
Right.
front to relook at it.
Right, and I think that's a
Okay.
great question, because it was based not upon a contract or state statute, but upon the city council acting as a whole, making a resolution to take this money and apply it to this cause, until it decides to change.
And I'm sure at the time, and here again, you know, I wasn't there, don't know those people, don't know what was in their mind. I'm sure I would have probably done the same thing, probably. But I'm thinking that they felt that obligation to help the county adjust to this new role that would be thrust upon them. I'm assuming that. And I'm assuming at the time, they thought the city can certainly afford that. You know, we can do that. We can do that. That's within our abilities. And times they have been a-changing, haven't they? And everything is more expensive. But I wanted to make sure I had that clear, that there was no legal binding that we even give them necessarily, even the 3 years, but we agreed to do that. And I know there were some people urging, and legally, we thought that was the right thing to do.
I think you're correct.
Okay.
Mr. Cobb, the only contract, according to Mr. Purcell, would be in that document, which was approved by the county and approved by the city. This is the plan we're going to use for consolidation. That's where the 3-year effort was mentioned.
Right,
And no longer than that, is 3 years, plain and simple.
right. None of the resolutions authorizing the donation of the city local option sales tax, its portion for schools, has any time limitation on it.
Yeah.
And one question, Ms. Lerner just told you she knew a lot more than I did about this, but in the sales tax referendum, and any of you that want a copy, I can get it to you, it's pursuant to state statute, and it simply increases the sales tax. There is no tie-in to education in the referendum.
Councilman Conger, I'll get you, I got one quick question.
Yes,
It's when the city residents, 1989, went to the polls and voted a sales tax for themselves, state law in effect at that time was any local option sales tax, 50% would go to education, 50% would go to the government collecting the tax.
Correct.
That's still the law. It was still the law then, and it's still the law now. And the council and the mayor, right after that consolidation effort, voted politically and collectively as a council, was not voted on by the citizens, to allocate the city's 50% to the county.
Exactly. Just
That
like
was-
any other budget item.
Right. It was not voted on by the people to take the city's 50% and give it to the county. That same law is still in effect then as it is now. So Councilman
Yeah,
Collins,
so
sorry.
just kind of reiterate, it was a referendum first, then a resolution by the city council, which was an open-ended resolution. There was no sunset, there was no time frame, there was no dollar cap. We can't go back and tell the previous city council, hey, you didn't make a good contract or resolution. Two, can you explain the process of the half for 1.25% that the city local option goes to the county school system, directly to the school system through the county, how that works?
When the voters of Madison County voted to increase local option tax, state law controls that, and state law dictates half goes to education. Since we only had one school system at that point, that half was going to go to the new consolidated school system. The other half goes to the governmental entity that collects it. Now, in Jackson, we're a regional retail area, and I think, Mayor, about 90% of all sales tax that is collected within this county is collected by the city. There are some other retail areas, I think Three-Way and down around Magic Valley, but the 90% is collected by the city. So that half of that 90% comes to the city of Jackson. Does that answer your question? And that formula has never changed.
From the city to, because we donated, give the money to the school system is what the resolution was. So what's the process from the city to get to the funding for the school system?
Okay. Since that time, the city has passed resolutions saying we allocate our portion of the increased local option sales tax to go to the schools. However, the check goes to the county, and then the county is the one that funds the schools. Does that make sense? It's like a third-party beneficiary contract, if there was one, or an agreement. We take money, we direct money to the schools as a donation, but once that donation is made, we lose control.
So the technicality is, once the money's given to the county, and if we were to pass this today and take this back, then the school system would not lose the money. It would be the mechanism by which the school system was funded.
The way the system is structured is the county provides the entire budget for this, well, there's federal grants, there's other things, but from the local option, that is something the county makes a decision on. I believe the county has expectations that it will continue to get these funds. I think I heard one of them say to the end of time. But really the question is the city obligated? Is this something the county is entitled to? Or is this something that the city makes a voluntary donation about? That's the crux, that's the issue. Does that answer your question? A resolution is like a donation. A contract has terms, conditions, usually has a start date, end date, a lot of other whereases and legal mumbo jumbo. The resolution is sort of short and sweet, take this money and use it for education.
So one real quick question, and I know others need time, but, so you're saying that the money that the city allocated, that was really to be used by the school system, we gave it to the county, and it was up to them to make sure that money was used, allocated to the school system, but they were under no obligation. Is
Right.
that correct?
When
For
you
it to
look
be used
at,
that way?
well, they're under an obligation to fund the schools. Because
Right,
the better
right.
education plan
Right.
requires continuation of effort and
Right,
things
and
like
the
that.
maintenance of Everett, and I
Right.
get that.
Uh,
But,
But once we give that money to the county, it becomes part of the county's budget. Makes sense? Just
Yes.
like if we make a donation to the United Way, unless we have the ability to earmark that fund, it's up to them to use it as they see fit, or to St. Jude's.
okay, because many people I've talked to feel that, we have given this money specifically to be used by the school system, and the county has used all of that money for the school system, and they may have, I don't know. But this is just interesting for me to hear that they can use it as they wish, regardless of our intent. Am I off still?
No.
A little bit off?
No, it's not, that's not.
Okay, well, let me hear that again, because I want to understand that, because I've had questions about
Let me approach it this way. We have special funds,
it. Okay,
and we have a general fund.
all right,
I'm not sure which fund they take and deposit this into.
okay,
But I do know that once the money is written to the county, then the county creates its budget, and its budget includes a special fund for education. And I know they have a designated property tax fund for education, separate. I know they get state shared funds for education. The other part of their budgeting process, I don't know. But what I do know is once we provide the funds, we don't have a vote how the county treats it. And just like the county, when they fund education, are limited in how the school board makes its decision of how to fund
all
it.
right, okay.
So there's an intersection of our power and funding, but we don't run them, and they don't necessarily run the school board. There's a differentiation. And so primarily, we create a regional retail area which collects sales tax. And that sales tax is sent to the state and comes back to us, and then we write a check
To the
to the
county.
county.
Okay.
That's how it's been for the last
Okay.
28 years.
Okay, that clears that up. And then the other thing is, I know we've gotten a lot of statistics, and somebody did a lot of work, you, Teresa, somebody, to provide all that for us. Has the city paid their fair share with education, or is it even?
If I may, the budget committee has a presentation that's going to cover a lot of these
Oh, okay,
questions.
okay,
Would you mind if I
Oh,
did
that's great.
that?
That's
And then we
great.
can come back and ask
That's great.
Lewis or
Yeah, that's great.
questions.
Yeah, I was
That's
going
great.
to tell you that the accountant and others have done the collection of the graphics. What
Yeah.
I've been asked to address is, before you even consider that,
Okay.
do we have the legal right to change the funding of our portion of the local option sales tax collected in the city?
Okay. That's fine, just as long as we're gonna get those other things answered, and I'm sure we will. Thank you very
Is that
much.
okay with the rest of the council committee? Go ahead and show the rest of the presentation as far as the. I'm going to step down here to do that. and I need to-
Before, Mr. Chairman, before Mr. Cobb gets up, his legal opinion is what?
Is that there is no binding contract or other legal obligation that restricts the city's ability to direct our portion of the local option sales tax to a specific use. That the city receives that money and can allocate that money as it, in its wisdom, sees fit. And so if it wants to make a change, it legally has the right to make a change.
And that was the opinion of
And
Mr.
that was the
Purcell.
same opinion Mr. Purcell and his partner.
Thank you.
When I finish, I still got a question for Lewis or Tracy, the one they'll be here, so. But the Budget Committee met, we discussed a lot of variety options on how we can help with the funding of the city, because we're spending a little bit more than we're taking in each year. We need to do something to address that. The sales tax issue on what we're paying to the schools came before us. We did some research on that. And due to that, the Budget Committee is recommending that the City Council approve the resolution that redirects the city shares of that 1.25% local option sales tax. It's going to Madison County now to actually go to the city's general fund. Let me see if I can get this working right.
Okay, Randy, that is a recommendation from committee, and there are no seconds required, so you can go ahead and pursue.
Okay,
your-
okay. History, I think Lewis covered a lot of that, but just kind of touch on that again and solidify it maybe. In 1989, Madison County voters passed a referendum to merge the city schools with Madison County schools. Madison County is the one that's actually mandated by the state to provide the education system. So for school system, the city was involved in the school system back then. We didn't have to be. I think that's something we elected to do way back. But state law requires all the counties across the state to provide education system. The state law also provides that the counties would be the one to be charged of funding the system. So therefore, in the consolidation, Madison County would be the one that would be in charge of funding the new Madison County school system. The second referendum that we talked about today that we're discussing, the city and Madison County voters also agreed to increase the local share of the state sales tax by 1.25%. It was 1.5, and this increased it to 2.75. So we're talking about just that 1.25% is what to do with our share of that. The city and county voters passed both of those resolutions with a 2-to-1 margin. Part of the rationale behind that increase in the 1.25% sales tax, and he mentioned that in the plan that he was showing, about 3-year time to level services up, was to level up those services. And they included providing more school buses, air conditioning for the schools. I think some of the city schools were air conditioned, the counties weren't. We wanted to get all the schools equalized, removing asbestos in some of the schools, and a big part of it was increasing salary and benefits for the Madison County teachers to be the same as what the Jackson City teachers were making. So those were the kind of leveling up processes. That was the rationale behind it. Local option sales tax, to make sure we fully understand that, there's the two parts of it. Like he mentioned, state mandates that half of all the sales tax revenues goes to the schools. The local sales tax revenue goes to the schools. So the 1.5 that we already had, half of that goes to the schools. 1.25 that we added, half of that's going to go to the schools regardless. And of the 1.5 originally, the half goes to schools, the other half goes to the city and the county, and then they decide what they want to do with their share. The 1.25, half of that goes to the schools, and then the other half goes to the city and the county, and they decide what they want to do with it. At that point in time, the city was donating its share for the schools. So I think we're kind of clear on that. There's been some concern or some questions about whether or not the city is paying its share for the schools. And if you look at the numbers, the city of Jackson residents pay the bulk of the local funding for the schools. About 89% of the total local dollars going to local schools is paid for by city residents. That means about 9 out of every 10 students are paid for by city residents. Since 1990, when the schools were consolidated, $680 million has been paid by the city taxpayer, contributed to the schools through the local option sales tax revenue. In 2016, 2017, the year we're in now, about $43.5 million of the funding for the schools comes from the city, and about $4 million comes from non-city residents. If you look at the graph here, this shows the 3 funding sources for the schools. The blue line is the state mandated city sales tax revenue. That's the half that automatically goes to the city, that we have no control over that. The yellow line is the property taxes that Madison County donates to the schools. And the red line is the City of Jackson's donation of that half of the 1.25%. That's the amount that we've been contributing to schools. If you look back in 1990 or 1991, I guess, when the actually first started, schools were consolidated around that period. The city was contributing about $4 million from that sales tax amount. The county was contributing about $6 million from their part of the property taxes they were allocating to schools. And then we had about $9 million coming from that half of the sales tax revenue. If you look over the years, the sales tax revenue has gone up considerably over the years for both the mandated portion and the portion the city's donated to schools. But about in 2004, 5, 6, around that area, the amount of property taxes that the county has contributed to schools has declined over those years. This next chart kind of shows the same thing. It shows the Madison County tax rate, property tax rate for schools, going back to 1990 when it was 1.29%, down to 2016 when it's about 0.2%. And you can see there's been a steady decline there also. Okay, now I've got a short video. If I can figure out what I'm doing.
Hi, I'm Steve Bowers. I'm a longtime resident of the city of Jackson, and I've been asked to explain as simply as possible what's been happening with education. We're going to take a look at 3 local sources of revenue.
Yeah, we're plugged in here.
System consolidated effectively.
Can we have some help from IT back there in the back, one of you guys?
And where we are today, and then what's happened in the, I'm Steve Bowers.
Technology is above our head.
We had it working last night.
You're asking Randy questions he can't answer.
Right. Doesn't have to do with money, Randy can answer it.
Let's, you want my chair, but it still has it, doesn't it? You have to,
Have to close that.
yeah, we have it. It's still got the screen.
It's only good.
Okay, let's try this again.
Hi, I'm Steve Bowers. I'm a longtime resident of the city of Jackson, and I've been asked to explain as simply as possible what's been happening with education funding in Jackson, Madison County. We're going to take a look at 3 local sources of revenue that started when the system consolidated effectively in 1990 to show where we were in 1990 and where we are today, and then what's happened in the transition. Each of these squares represents $1 million. The city had its local option that it had designated for schools that it surrendered as a donation to this system of $4 million. The county property tax that year would generate $6 million for the school system, and this is earmarked locally generated sales tax of $9 million that went to the school system, and this was the total of the local funding for the consolidated system its first year in 1990. To understand the difference from where we started in 1990 and where we are today, let's go back to 2004, which puts us about halfway between those 2 points. In 2004, the city's donation to the school system had grown from $4 million to $9 million. The county property tax year designated for education had grown from $6 million to $15 million. And the earmarked, locally generated sales tax had grown to $20 million. That's in 2004. In examining these transitions, this is where we end up. The local city donation gift to the school system has grown to $12 million. The earmarked generated sales tax has grown to $26 million. And during these intervening years, over this last decade, this is what's happened to the county property tax as designated for local education. It's gone back to the level of 1990.
So based on that information, and the fact that the sales tax that's funding the schools has increased so dramatically over the years, particularly that half that is mandated, and a big portion of that is paid by city taxpayers, or a big portion of that sales tax comes from the city, then the budget committee is making a recommendation that we reallocate that city share, that 1.25%, back to the city general fund.
Any questions from the Budget Committee or other members of the council as far as,
Yes, good morning, Mayor.
Go
I
ahead.
just have a few questions and want to clarify a few things. So if we, and Brandon, you can jump in and maybe help us. If we take this action today, will that result in a decrease in school funding, period?
That would be up to the county. I wouldn't think so, but that's a question for the county, I guess, is whether they would not come up with other sources to fund the school. I think they've got that maintenance of effort that they've got to do, that they've got to fund anyway, but that would be a question for the county. I couldn't answer that.
And the maintenance of effort, about how much is that per
I
year?
could not answer that question either.
It, from our information, it's about 48 million. Is that pretty accurate? That we're funding
I
per
would guess
year
so.
from both bodies? And of that 48 million, how much is the city paying?
Of the
Roughly.
maintenance of effort?
Right.
It's none of that is the city. That's all the county maintenance of effort. It's all county, the school system is all county funded.
Right.
I think Councilman's asking how much of the total cost of maintenance effort is borne by city residents. Is that?
Right,
did I read you
that's
there?
my
Mayor, can you answer that?
We know
About
37
37.
million from the local option sales taxes. Through a formula, you can bank another 6 million from city residents walking to the courthouse to pay their property taxes. 37 plus 6 will give you that number.
Okay. And the maintenance of effort is the responsibility of the county, correct?
Correct. Yeah, the fund of the school system is responsibility of the county. And one other thing, before we get any more questions, I did want to point out that the link to the video and the graphs and whatnot on the PowerPoint presentation, we do have access, you have access to those if anybody wants them. Mary Reed's got that, and you can email her and she can give it to her. Mary, where are you? Okay, so if you'll holler at Mary, that she'll get any of that information for you that you want, or the link to the video, either one.
Okay, any other questions from council or any comments from council or the members of the Budget Committee? We do have some people here who fully realize we want to address council, and those of you here that would like to address the council on this particular issue, this is an invitation for public comment on this one item under new business. You're welcome to come up and have a seat and to address the council. If you'd be kind enough to give us your name and your address, and we'll be happy to call on you. Anyone present? Mr. Donnell.
Yes, sir.
Just say yes, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Richard Donnell. I live at 99 Hickory Hollow here in Jackson. As I believe it was Will Rogers who claimed to say it, all that I know is what I read in the newspapers. It's my understanding that based upon all that has occurred, the recommendation of the Budget Committee, which I believe met and made a decision to make this recommendation a few days ago. The council, of course, wants to take action. From what I have read and heard, the taking of this money will have a significant impact on the school system. that may or may not be correct. In that regard, I question the council acting so quickly after the recommendation has been made by the Budget Committee. I'm thinking about the impact that it may have on children who attend public schools. And in that regard, based upon some of the questions that I've heard some of the council members ask, it appears that the council members have not had a conversation with the county commission members. It appears that way. That may or may not be wrong. If that is the case, I would urge, before you make a decision to reallocate this money, that, Mayor, that you would appoint a committee among council members, allow them the opportunity to meet with members of the county commission to see if some kind of agreement can be worked out, a consensus agreement that could be worked out, so that this will not have significant impact upon the children who attend public school. And that you come back sometime prior to the beginning of the next fiscal year and then make a decision. But that you not make it right now until you've had the opportunity to talk and consult with and possibly work out an agreement with the county. That's my statement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I'm David Balt, 9 Overlook Cove, Jackson, Tennessee. And my statement and my question, I guess, would be, sometimes you can do something, but the why is this suddenly an issue? Why suddenly are we needing $12 million? What happened to the money? We're looking at issues like the waste management issue, where there is an option to save $1.5 million, and we didn't save $1.5 million. Why are we in the state we're in? Why do we need to drop a bombshell on education in Madison County? It seems like we've made a lot of choices, and maybe we need to look back at the budget and see where we can save money, rather than where we can cut education and education spending in Madison County. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. In response to, and I think it's a very good question, you know, what's our plan for the funding? The plan for the funding is, there's a long list of needs that the city has implemented through long-range planning to continue to grow our city. Most of that is infrastructure needs, renovation of existing public venues that need to be renovated desperately. 67, almost $68 million worth of capital improvements for a city to continue to grow our city. Jackson, Tennessee is the economic engine that drives economic development in West Tennessee. We have an obligation to continue to grow our city with infrastructure, to make sure it's a good infrastructure for people to come and spend their money, in Jackson, Tennessee, at a retail center which continues to grow by leaps and bounds due to the improvements this council has made and other councils have made over the years to draw people into Jackson from a 50-mile radius to come in here and shop, to use our medical facilities. And some of those infrastructure needs includes a number of locations where I'm sure most of you are aware of. Airways Boulevard, number one. Entrance, a gateway to our city. Look at Airways Boulevard. Millions of dollars to get that ready to come into the gateway to our city. Highland Avenue, Old Hickory, the area there with tourist merchandise and belts, that entire, we're extremely concerned about that. The mall owners have asked us to look at a major streetscape program for Highland Avenue to dress up that area in there to where they can maintain their mall here. They're happy here, but they said it would certainly help them build the area for that streetscape. That takes several $1 million. So we have a list of $68 million that we have plans for to rebuild our city and make it accessible to the next generation and keep this city moving forward. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
My name is Brenda K. Monroe Moses, and I live at 332 Hale Street in Jackson, Tennessee. And unfortunately, I have not, I've been out of the loop of this discussion and just found out very recently what was going on. So as I listened to Dr. Foote ask about what was going on in the minds of the people when this was decided upon in '89, well, I was one of the people that was there, and what was going on in my mind then, I couldn't possibly tell you. I can just tell you we dealt with what we were dealing with at that time, and we made the best decision in the best interest for students. That's what education is about. It's not about all the other things that make it happen. It's about people who are human beings who have a right to have a decent education, an adequate education, so they can move on in life and have opportunities, meet the opportunities and the challenges of becoming responsible and productive citizens in our society. Unfortunately, Jackson, Tennessee is not alone in seeing to it, has reneged on some things in education, and that concerns me deeply. I want to know what happened to initiatives such as having world-class schools. And when you start talking about taking something away, taking money away to that extent, I know that it's not going to have a great outcome. That is just how I feel about it. And so I'm amen what Mr. Donnell said. You got some time to think about it and look at it and maybe involve some more people who are have an interest as consumers of what goes on in our educational system. I can tell you for one thing for certain, the demographics of who we were serving is quite different from what we have now. And there have been some changes that have taken place that, you know, everything that's, I heard Mr. Cobb, who is a great expert in the and great legal mind, give his opinion about what's legal. But everything that's legal, I'm sure some of you will agree, is not always right or righteous. And history bears that out. So I think there's a moral obligation that ought to be considered here to the greatest extent, to take the time to see what you're doing and what the potential impacts that might happen to students would be. And that's why I came this morning.
Thank you. Ms. Brenda?
Mayor, if I could just,
Go ahead, Council. Yeah.
I'm kind of confused here. I mean, looking at the numbers, everybody's saying we are taking away from education. Had anybody saying why hadn't the county gave more money to education? I mean, you know, I'm looking like we've gave our share for. The last thing I want to do is do anything to hurt education, our school system. But I think if we're getting our fair share and everybody's looking down at what we're not doing, we're taking away, but nobody's saying why the county's not giving more. It's like we've been looked at as the bad guy, but, you know, I would do anything, do anything to destroy our education for our kids or our future. We got a new superintendent coming in. I want to make sure he succeeds. I want my school system is looked upon as being, you know, top grade. But I mean, I think we need to look at both sides and not look at us as taking away from education and ask the county why they're not giving more money. You know, we want to fund the jail. We want to give $30 million to build a jail. Why can't we take $30 million to give to the city? I mean, give to the school system. That's where the money to be given instead of building a jail, put into education. But we're looking at, we're taking away, but they're not giving more. So I think people need to look at that, but I don't want to do anything to destroy. I mean, if, you know, I'm willing to look at the budget for the school system that come up this year, if any money that we're taking away, if there's any kind of way we can work up and come up with an agreement to give them opportunity to prepare for us taking this money away if the vote go that way. But I think we need to look at it both ways and not looking at us just being the bad guys.
Let me make one statement, Mr. Dean, I'll call on you just a second. I think we're looking at a fairness issue here. The city, you know, I think is paying considerably more than its fair share for education. We're all interested in education. We have contributed $680 million since consolidation to get that world-class education system that you mentioned. And I'll leave it up to you whether we have a world-class education system in our city. But it's all a matter of fairness and who's, you know, most of our contracts. We have contracts with the county, very, very good contracts. We sit down occasionally and walk through them, and we're all pretty happy when we leave. Those contracts with the library, EMA and the airport. Those contracts are 50-50. 50-50. And I don't see personally anything wrong with a 50-50 cut in education. If we take our share of the sales tax that we've given to the county back and use it to build infrastructure, long-term needs for a city, then that split is 50-50. And that'll make us all paying pretty much the same. So with that, Ms. Deaton.
My name is Gary Deaton. I live at 27 Plantation Drive in Jackson. And this is a very disturbing thing to me for a couple of reasons. I think the thing the mayor just mentioned would have been very good for us to have been able to sit down and discuss some of these things together, because the implication of what you're getting ready to make a decision on affects the total county. When you pull $12 million out of the school system, that's devastating, very devastating. And I know you're saying, well, the county will have to make that up. But the issue that we're talking about is, one, the legal aspect of it. Mr. Cobb has presented it to you, and legally, he may be totally correct. He's a lawyer. I'm sure he didn't come here and tell you things that he knew you couldn't back up. But for 28 years, the community was under the impression, when we consolidated, that 1.25 was to be used for education. And Ms. Foote, to make you aware of one thing, that 1.25, 100% goes to the school system. The county has no control over how that money is used or spent. It goes to the school system, and they apply that to their budget. And they've used that over the years. And we take that in consideration when we're making an overall budget. But you take that away from the school system July 1, it affects everybody in Madison County. This is not just a city issue. This is a county issue that affects everyone. So if we remove that $12 million from the school system, how do you expect it to be replaced? Who do you expect to replace that money? Who's going to step up the plate and say, well, so we're talking about somebody raising taxes. Is that what we're talking about? You're saying the city don't want to raise taxes, so we're going to force the county to raise taxes to make up that $12 million that we're taking back. Now, I would love to see us sit down and discuss all these issues together, and I wish we'd have done that before you came to this meeting today. I think Mr. Darnell is totally correct. This is a very quick meeting, a very quick decision, and I think a responsible thing to do would be sit down with all parties. We'd love to meet with the budget committee from the city, the finance committee from the county, would have all parties there. You'd have a school superintendent there, you'd have the county mayor there, you'd have everyone there to sit down and discuss this. But to make a decision this quickly, to me, is not very responsible. I hope you will reconsider that. I hope you will postpone this till we can have that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deaton. Now, just one quick statement. I see no barrier to when we meet. Obviously, we meet with county officials every day, and whether we meet before the vote or after the vote, anything that can be done can be undone. There's no barrier there as far as meeting with the county. It can be tomorrow, or we can take this vote, and it can be 2 weeks away, or a month away, or 2 months away. Both the city and the county, as far as the time issue, we have to get a budget approved. And that's why we're meeting today to move ahead with our process to put together a budget for next fiscal year for our city. And the county, I assume, is doing pretty much the same thing.
I just want to make a quick point in the context of things. We talk about city and counties, that they're two different places within the state. The city's within the county. So whether we raise taxes in the city or raise taxes in the county, the city residents are going to have to pay those taxes.
My name is Mike Nichols. I live at 120 Oakfield Road. I am not a city resident, but I'm a Madison County resident. I have been on the county commission starting in 1990. I know a lot of you for years and years. Randy Wallace, I've known you longer than we want to say. Let me clear up. I've worked for 12 years as finance director of the county. Let me tell you a little bit about how the sales taxes are split up. And I put out a report every month detailing the sales taxes for schools, City of Jackson, Madison County General Fund, three-way, etc. And I don't look at it as far as the 1.25 and a 0.75. And Mr. Rahm asked me yesterday, well, what is those figures? I just take what was resolved by the city government and the county government back then and add all those things together, come up with a total dollar figure. And those dollar figures go exclusively to schools or wherever it's been designed for. But Mr. Brooks, you are right, the maintenance of effort is approximately $48 million. And I think what you're talking about now is $12 million. And what I've heard from some county commissioners, now this is not my decision, would be their decision, that's approximately 59 to 60 cents on our tax rate, which would be borne, and which we have to make up the maintenance of effort, and which would be borne by all Madison County residents, including city residents. But I did want to say one thing, that my father was the vice chairman of the Consolidation Committee when it was formed. And he recommended doing it. And as I voted on the resolution, I voted for it. And the reason I voted for it, it was consolidate schools, but it had a long-term funding source. I thought that funding source would be there. To me, as a voter, I thought if the city council could change things, I was deceived as a voter. I would not have voted for it back at that time. So that's just me.
Mr. Nichols, just one quick question. How do you address the charge that the county is paying less and less over time into the school system? How do you address the chart that Mr. Wallace put up a bit ago? How do you address that?
This is the first time I'd seen that. I'd have to study it to answer those questions.
Okay.
But like I said, I just take the dollar figures by agreement, and it comes back from the state. Trustee Newman gets those dollars, and he's designated for schools. What is designated for schools goes directly into schools.
And as finance director, surely you're not here to say that the county has paid more over the years.
I don't know that. I have not seen those slides until this morning, so I apologize. I can't answer that question right now.
Thank you, sir.
But I would be happy to study it.
Okay, I wish you would.
Okay.
Mayor, if I may,
Go ahead.
just to make it clear from the Budget Committee standpoint, the Budget Committee is definitely not in favor of cutting funding for schools. That's the last thing we want to do. The only thing we're looking at is we're representing the city of Jackson, and the city, the amount that it looks like the city is paying for the schools has increased over the years. The amount the county has decreased. We all understand that if you live in the city, you're a county taxpayer, but we feel like that the schools should be funded by the county, the overall county, not just the county taxpayers that live inside the city limits. And that's why, it mentioned if the taxes have got to go up, the taxes are going to go up on city residents. That's true. But if the taxes just go up on city residents, the people who live outside the county are going to get another benefit. The city taxpayers are going to be double taxed again, whereas the people that live outside the city limits won't be. And that's the rationale behind why we brought this.
Mr. Nichols, you say what's your position again?
Finance Director of Madison County.
And you said you was not aware that we was paying more than y'all was paying?
No.
I'd just like to give you a little bit about my personal experience. I just, when I first started looking at this, from 3 yesterday to 3 this morning, I really had a lot of different thoughts. My background's in education. I've been a teacher, administrator 35 years, almost all of those years in Madison County Public Schools. Have a lot vested in it. I have great-grandchildren that go there. Have a daughter that is an administrator there. Have nieces and nephews that teach there. As Johnny said, I think we can speak for everybody up here. Nobody wants to hurt children in the educational system. At the same time, I love the city of Jackson. And yes, I guess I'm partial to South Jackson. That's my territory. And yes, I was upset last year when Melissa's was closed. That was rough. My constituents were unhappy. But it had to be done, you know, tough decisions have to be made, and schools had to be closed. And nobody wants their own school closed, but that had to be made, and made a lot of people unhappy. But it had to be done financially. Now, they're opening those schools again, so I'm not sure about the thinking there, but anyway, I think they made good choices in the schools that they closed. They made the best choices they could. We have difficult decisions to make too. As much as I love Jackson, Madison County schools, where I taught, where my husband taught, where so many of my family, 27 members altogether, believe it or not, through the years, devoted to that school system and those children. We have city children that go to those schools. I'm devoted to them too. I'm devoted to the parents as well. City faces tremendous challenges right now, as I'm sure the county does and the school system does. Some financial, some otherwise. We have to look at something else. As you're saying, some of the school children might suffer from this, and that is debatable. That would have to be looked at, and I know it means the county provides more money. I know. I know you have to make tough choices and things that you do not provide, wise decisions and so forth. But the parents of those children, many of them are employed by the city, and we don't want to put them out of jobs to meet our financial obligations. That's not helping those children either. So I kind of feel like this morning I'm torn between two loves, or it's like, which child do I hurt the least? That's the way I look at this thing this morning, and it's very difficult for me to vote because I feel that I've just got such a conflict of interest. I really do. But I believe with all my heart, as some others have said, the mayor included, and Johnny, and I think Ernest Brooks, those children are all our children, and education is our entire responsibility. And no, I don't think you always have to go by the law, but I think you need to be fair. I think that's moral to be fair. And I think we should share equally in those concerns. I'm all for looking at it again and maybe not taking 12 million immediately, but it should be equal. And perhaps some of it should be made up from the past. I'm not sure about that, but it should be equal. I think we have to have a compromise. Each person doesn't get everything they want, but some of what they want. And of course, that makes nobody happy. I understand that. But I think that's the only fair thing to do. And one other thing I wanted to say is that I think we forget so often is we want to say the county runs a school system, they provide, and so forth and so on. And now we know, our money goes to a lot of that. But, even after, just forget about the money, the city also provides so many things for these children that the county has not provided. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Maybe they just didn't think of it, and the city did, and we were willing to do it. But, for a number of years, we did provide the police officers the security in the schools. And even today, in the Jackson Sun front page, that wonderful DARE program that's going on at Arlington, and you need to read that. It's a wonderful article. It's very successful. And we got a police officer that runs that and does that. So I just don't like to hear some comments that I've heard that the city is greedy. We've not been greedy when it came to these school children. We have done our duty toward them. And I'm not saying the county hasn't. Maybe they haven't provided as much money, but they're devoted to the school system too. They want it to be successful. We all do. But I think a compromise needs to be made. I think it can be. We're intelligent people. Perhaps an option to look at is whatever, if this council votes to take some money back, perhaps we should use some of that money to pay back what we owe them on the liquor tax so that they would have that money to help them cushion the blow. I think there are a lot of things, as the mayor said, we can look at. And I don't see this as a final vote today. I just don't. Because a resolution is a resolution. Just like we can change the resolution today from what it was 20 years ago, we could change it next week, next month. It could be changed again.
Mayor, if I may.
Councilman, yeah.
we're talking about here is what's fair, what's equitable, what's morally equitable, what's morally fair. And the reality is that in 1989, the city consolidated schools with the county, that became the body, the governing body, the purse strings of the school system, and the county and the city has no seat at the table. What we're looking at here is an equitable share of the cost, which gives us an opportunity. I would recommend to this council and this mayor that we take a seat at the table with that fair share of costs, and we work with the school system on their capital needs with requests come every year, because we know it's going to be a struggle to make this transition, and whether it be a stair set, whether it be negotiation, if we have the ability to do so, that we work with the school board and the school system to address the capital needs that will come up without a doubt. And that gives us an option, because I think the biggest criticism we've heard is there's no voice from the city within the school system, and that gives us a seat at the table to be able to work with the school system hand in hand, instead of just being providing a check every year.
Let me say this, and it'll probably be my final comment. If council has a determination to approve this resolution today, then I certainly would have no issue in meeting with members of the county commission, the school board, staff, next week, if that's what we need to do. There's no barriers to us meeting. No one's in a cell here. No one's locked in a cell. We can all get out and talk. But I would urge this council to act upon this resolution. Then we'll get in some meetings, if it's council approves, anytime you all want to meet, and we'll need to do it through a committee. And a committee will certainly be appointed, but we have a budget to put together right now. That's why we're meeting. We need to finish the budget. County needs to finish their budget, and that's hard to do when you don't know how much money you're going to have. So that's why we are in a little bit of urgent situation. That's why we're meeting. So with that, Mr. Stevenson, I think you're up next. Thank you, Ms. Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sir.
My name is Doug Stevenson. I live at 124 Walnut Street. Just a couple things, and I want to reiterate what Commissioner Deaton has stated is, and what Mayor Gist just stated, I think is very, very important, is that we need to communicate this between our bodies. Just a couple of examples of some things that we've done in the past where we communicated. The mixing bar taxes from 1999. You were unaware of that. I believe we worked with you, communicated with you to negotiate something that would be fair to both bodies. As a matter of fact, we have an agreement that you would pay $221,874 for the next 10, well, to 2024. That's an example of what we worked with. Mr. Dawson came to us about 2 or 3 years ago and said you did not have enough money to pay for the library. Maintenance of effort, and I'm not disagreeing with what Mayor Gist had stated, is that it's a 50-50 agreement. We stood up and took care of that. Now, what Ms. Foote is asking us to do is to come up and be fair and equitable, and I understand about 683, whatever that amount is. My question is, why is it taking us 25 years to get to that point to make you aware of that, where you have to stay up from 3 till 3 in the morning and not aware of that?
No, I was aware of that.
Do what now?
I was aware of that.
Okay.
But I
Well,
wasn't aware of all the statistics.
My point being is that we have certain things that we, and going back to what Commissioner Deaton has stated, is that we need to work together. We need to work together on this. And I think Mayor Gist is making a good, fair point. Now, in fair and equitable, we just borrowed $10 million to take care of capital needs for the schools. Is that going to be fair and equitable for y'all to come up with half the money to pay for that, which is approximately $143 million plus the $68 million that you need to take care of these infrastructure projects? Are we going to be fair and equitable on that? Just a couple things to think about as we move along. I mean, we can sit up here, I can do the same thing, sit up on our high horse and say, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. This is where the rubber meets the road, gentlemen and ladies.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion.
Call for question.
Call for question. And
You got
You mind withdrawing that till we hear
Yeah,
from
we-
county
we gotta
mayor?
hear that.
Okay. Yes.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Jimmy Harris, I live 162 Old Stage Road. Scott, you took a little of my thunder because I did want to remind everybody here that you're a city councilman and a mayor, but you also are a resident of Madison County. So anything the county does affects you just like it does all the other people in the city of Jackson or Madison County. You know, we've talked a lot about this school consolidation. That was a long, drawn-out, hard-fought process. I've gone back and looked at articles from months and months dating back, well, I don't even know how far back they went, but I know in 1989, there was a significant amount of meetings, committee formed to try to consolidate the school system. My memory is, and what I read is, the city desperately wanted to get out of the school business. Mayor Charles Farmer, when he ran for election that year, one of his platforms was the consolidation of schools. As my memory, and Vicki, memories are kind of cloudy as time goes on.
I
but
understand.
the city approached the county about consolidating schools. But that's neither here nor there. The point is that there was a movement of front to consolidate schools. As the discussions went on, and you know, it was a massive undertaking. It absolutely was. John D. Graham and that committee did an excellent job of doing that. But also, as was mentioned, the funding mechanism came up. And then the idea of the sales tax came up. And so if you work through to the time the referendum came to be voted on, as far as school consolidation and the sales tax, the sales tax increase, there had been much of, I guess you'd say, campaign rhetoric. And I challenge any one of you to find any place on any office holder, any committee member that ever stated to the public that was going to vote on this, the citizens, that it was for a 3-year period. I challenge you. You won't find it because everybody desperately wanted that to go into the school system and continue to fund the school system. It was never, ever imagined that there would be anything else. I've got a resolution here passed by the city council in April of 1989. Now, the vote was May 26, 1989. This resolution says, and I want to read just a snippet of it, it had a resolution pertaining to consolidation, but it also had a resolution concerning the sales tax. It says the city of Jackson desires to allocate all of its share of the proceeds of the proposed sales tax increase to education and specifically to a newly created consolidated school system. Didn't say for 3 years, didn't say for 10 years. It didn't specify because we were selling it to the people. If you vote for this tax, it's going to fund schools perpetually. Perpetually. In addition to that, it says you agree to relinquish its right to its share of the proposed sales tax so that all the revenue generated from the said tax may be devoted to the consolidated school system. Now, folks, that was in April of '89. The vote for the sales tax and consolidation was in May. So what did the citizens expect when they went to the polls to vote? They voted for a consolidated school system, and they were voting on a sales tax increase. The city had already already promised and publicized that their half of that was going to the school system. So the consolidation plan was filed down at the Election Commission office. So at any person wanting information on what they're going to vote on was there available. And Lewis, I challenge the 3-year period you're talking about, that anywhere
in anything the city said they would do had any stipulations on it as far as 3 years. But my point is, the people voted on this based off of what they were promised and what they were told and what the obligation the city said they would do and the county said they would do. So they voted themselves a tax increase. Now, I firmly believe that the consolidation of our schools was the best avenue to go. But I do believe if you had put in this document, or at any point, any time, the public was informed that at any point in the future, the city council wanted to change the funding, the contribution of that sales tax into the school system, there would have been a totally different outcome. But they weren't told that. They were told that money was going to the school system. No ifs and buts, no time frame, no anything. So I think, to me, when we talked about morals and ethics, legally, I defer to the lawyers because I don't know. You may be exactly right, and I assume you are, or Lewis wouldn't have spent all this time and effort. And it's quite evident that you folks have spent many months exploring this possibility. And the mayor graciously gave us about a 46-hour notification that this was going to happen. So we've had 46 hours to even think about what you just proposed, Randy. I do have a question for you. On your budget committee, was the vote unanimous or was it by majority vote? It was unanimous. All members there? All and all five of them members voted. Okay. Okay. So, what I'm asking you to consider is, the people of this city and this county voted on an increase in taxes based off of what this government and the county government promised to do. And if you want to change that, then you need to go back and ask the people what they want to do. Because they're the ones that put it here, made it available for the education of our children. I don't think there is anything morally or ethically right in changing something that was promised to the people of this community. Now, Vicki, you asked, is it going to harm kids? It absolutely is not. Because we have an obligation to provide an education, we have an obligation of maintenance of effort, and we're going to meet it. Now, how are we going to meet it? We're going to raise your property taxes. That's the only way we can
Well,
do
you
it.
kind of already
And-
have.
But understand,
Raise it.
understand,
Yeah.
y'all represent, give or take, about 68,000 people. We represent those 68 plus about another 30,000 more. We have to answer to them, and you do too. And I'm telling you, right now, today, there will be a give or take 60-cent property tax increase, a minimum of that will represent a 28 to 30% increase in county property tax. And you talk about the business, Mayor. When the property tax is raised, a business owner that has a business and property has to pay that bill. What's going to happen with that? They're going to pass it on to their consumer. Their prices are going to have to go up to pay the additional property tax. It is, I think, folks, I don't think I've ever experienced a group that would potentially renege on a promise made to the public they represent. I just don't. I just don't see how you can legitimately think that you are going to change something that the people voted on. If you want to change it, take it to a referendum. I promise you, not one person that voted for this tax increase voted for these taxes to be diverted to pave streets in Jackson versus going to education. That's not what they voted on. There was no mention of that, period. The other thing I'd like for you to consider, and that is that the last 8 to 10 years, through my effort and Mayor Gist's effort, and along with y'all and the county commission, city and county have had probably one of the best relationships we've had in many, many years in this community. It showed, it paid off. You know, Pacific Industries told us a part of the reason our community was attractive to them to locate an industry here was because of it seems like the cohesiveness of the government as well as the community. You're absolutely putting that in jeopardy if you vote to do this. And that is an important aspect of us continuing to exist and coexist in this community. But just remember, we all represent the same people. We just represent 30,000 more than you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Dodger recognized.
Yeah, I had called for questions, but I have to make some comments real quick. First of all, I would like to, if we could recommend putting together a group to bring back to us and to discuss, along with the new superintendent, to make sure our efforts are not gonna lead them to the point where they not be able to, do their budget for the school system in the upcoming year. And I wanna make sure, give them opportunity to, get things together and get their budget together, make sure we don't do anything to harm them. But then second of all, I feel kind of appalled too, for another body of government to come before us and to talk about our more active, when they make votes all the time talking about jails and other things, and that's not more active when they do things like that. We gotta respect each other's decision when it comes to doing your budget, we do our budget, but to say we're not being monitored and our actives not being respected towards the people, I think that's a slap in the face. I mean, we gotta be fair still at the end of the day. But we never question y'all more, but I want to call a question for the vote.
Okay, we have a call for question. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. It'll end discussion on this issue. Council is ready to vote on the resolution without any further discussion or debate.
Mr. Chairman, would you read the resolution?
Councilman Wallace, you want to read the resolution for the council?
You want to read the whole thing or just the therefore at the bottom what we're voting on?
All of it.
Okay. Resolution directing the city's share of the local option sales tax. Whereas on April 4th, 1989, the City Council of the City of Jackson approved a resolution allowing its share of the 1.25 cent increase in the local option sales tax to be donated for the benefit of the consolidation of Jackson-Madison County school system. And whereas on May 25th, 1989, a referendum was approved by the voters of Madison County to consolidate Jackson and Madison County schools. And whereas an increase in local option sales tax was approved by the voters on May the 25th, 1989. And whereas the terms of this donation have twice been modified by a prior resolution of the Jackson City Council dated November the 2nd, 1999 and February the 6th, 2001. And whereas rising costs, decrease in revenue sources, increased debt service, demands of our aging infrastructure, and the need to continue to attract jobs to the City of Jackson require additional revenue if the City of Jackson is going to remain financially strong and secure a bright future for our community. And whereas these needs of the City of Jackson make it appropriate to revise the City of Jackson's donations to the Jackson-Madison County school system to meet the needs of the city going forward. And whereas Tennessee Code annotated 67-6-712A authorized the City of Jackson to determine the use to which its share of the local option sale tax shall be put. Now therefore be it resolved that the Jackson City Council hereby rescinds and supersedes the February 6, 2001 resolution and directs that its share of the 1.25 cents directed in the local option sales tax be deposited in the general fund of the City of Jackson. Be it further resolved that this resolution shall take effect July 1st, 2017, the public welfare requiring it.
And this resolution represents a 50-50 split?
Essentially.
Essentially?
Yeah.
Essentially.
Very good.
Okay, there has been a call for the question. There's a second. That ends discussion, ends debate on the issue. I'll remind the council that a call for the question takes 2/3 vote. Council, please vote on the resolution.
Call for what? Call for question on the resolution.
A vote on the Anita, where are we on that motion? Yeah, on the vote. It's a call for the question. It's a call for the question. Okay, let's vote on call for the question. Takes 2/3. Please vote.
And the vote passes with 5 members in favor, 2 against, and 1 abstaining.
All right. Okay. Okay, now then, we'll go directly to the resolution, which you just heard Councilman Wallace read. That call for the question was approved. Now it's time to vote on the resolution. Council, please vote.
And that motion passes with 5 members in favor, 1 voting no, and 1 abstaining. 6 in favor. 6 in favor, 1 voting no, and 1 abstaining. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Anita. Meeting is adjourned.
There was who? He was for it or something?
Yeah, he's working at Cypress Grove.
You should have spoken, you should have said something.